It was the morning of All Saints Day, 98, when that old blind dog started roaming around the graveyard. Wouldn't have bothered me so much, worry not walking on his hind legs and smoking cigars. Recite my lineage and genealogy, you've got to know your history, son of Virginia.
Welcome to the social-engineer.org podcast number 87.
72.
Yes, that familiar sound, that annoying grating sound in the background is none other but Dave Kennedy. Yes, we missed you, Dave.
Miss you all too.
And now you have people in the community trolling me. I want to thank you very much because some guy tweeted to me the other day, hey, I just started listening to your podcast. How many episodes are there? And I had 3 people respond before I could. I think there's only 12, or maybe there's 4, or maybe there's 17. And then they all tagged you in it. So thank you for that.
I made you my running mate for when I run for president.
Yeah, someone took a picture of the slide. It was after you slapped me in the groin.
I know.
And I was on the ground crying.
That's the best picture I had. You bring out your hair, your eyes, you know, the tears in the eyes.
That's the picture that you put in your speech of me. Really. Thanks. Thanks. Well, I do have to say that it was kind of nice to have one of my people ice you at a different conference while on the platform. That was fun.
Awesome as well. Yeah, thank you. And the funny part about that was it wasn't like a small, normal Smirnoff Ice.
I know. She said she found a 32-ounce ice or something like that.
It was terrible.
Oh, you deserve it. And you got to admit, the best icing of the universe was at Derby when we had people searching the hotel for you because we tweeted it and At Whiskey retweeted us.
When At Whiskey was like, you need to go find this man and ice him. I'm like, what in the...
That was good times, man. People running through the hotel searching for you. It was epic.
That was great. Great times.
Derby was good this year, man. Derby was awesome. Oh, as usual, but another great year.
I feel like this year was the best that we've ever had, man. I really do.
It really went so smooth. Everything was awesome. For us, SE Village was phenomenal there. It was packed the whole time.
Thank you so much for doing that. In fact, we got nothing but compliments on that, minus you running it. But other than that, it was great.
Why? Why, Michelle? Why? Why did we do it? Why?
Well, Dave is just one of those guys. He gets around. I just saw him in Houston, actually. We spoke on a panel together at Grace Hopper and had a pretty decent time, I think.
I agree. You did awesome.
It was a panel for women about women in tech, right? And it was you and a bunch of other really powerful women, and then Dave.
I'm not going to lie. It was a little bit awkward, but it was a good cause.
When I heard that announcement, I'm like, wait. When they called us, they said it was all about powerful women in tech. Let's get Michelle up there and June and Rhonda and Kat and Dave Kennedy. And I'm like, wait. Dave Kennedy's not a powerful woman in tech.
It was actually really awesome. I think it's important to have different perspectives that everybody, does. So I think it was really good.
I think it was great, and I think it was really a nice compliment to both you, Dave, and Chris as being advocates for women in technology. So thank you to you both.
Yeah, it's awesome. I was really happy to have you there. I heard some great things. Twitter was blowing up about the panel, so it was really nice. This is not your last time to see Michelle this year. Michelle, you're going to be in Dallas, like in a few weeks after this podcast comes out, right? In Dallas.
Yes, I will. I will be at the Dallas CISO Event Executive Summit on November 29th. So if you're there, come say hi.
That's another awesome event. So anyone in Dallas, definitely go see Michelle at that. We also have a series of webinars coming up with Dark Reading. We did a couple of them. They were really successful. And now they've invited us back to do, I think there's 2 more this year already. One's coming up. It's next week, isn't it?
Yeah, it is November 10th. For you and I, and then I'm going solo in December because you will be in the UK.
I will be in the UK for our last training of 2016. It's our OSINT training, and honestly, I didn't think it was going to sell out as it is. I think there's only 3 or 4 seats left in the whole class as of now, so I don't know what will happen by the time this comes out, but Great training. Two-day OSINT class being held. That's going to be on, let me give you the exact dates. That is December 1st and 2nd, Thursday and Friday, in Bristol, UK. It's our last training of 2016. Let's see, 2017, I better do this. Ping isn't here today. Ping is traveling for work, so she's not with us. And if I don't do this and she hears it, she's going to yell at me. We have our APSE class 2017, February 6th through 10 in Orlando, Florida. That class is filling up now as we speak. It's not near sold out, so don't get nervous, but that class normally sells out by probably the beginning of January. So you're going to want to get in there if you're looking for that class.
You're supposed to be the master of influence. You're supposed to tell them seats are on the verge of selling out.
Okay.
Buy
What
now.
I meant to say was that there's only one seat left, even though the website says 12. So just one.
Yeah.
1.2. That's what it really means.
For the next half hour.
For the next half hour. But wait, there's more. If you go to the website now and sign up, we will allow you to get 2 seats for the price of 2.
Come on, man. You're the master of influence.
Thank you. Yeah, I think me and Cialdini should work together on his 4th book. I could teach him some things.
That was a great podcast, by the way.
That was an awesome podcast. I still listen to that one over and over again. I loved having that guy on there. MLSE sold out. Sorry, you can't come. It's already sold out. And then APSE in the UK in June. And that date, it will tell you, is June 5 through 9, back in awesome Bristol, which is a beautiful time of year in Bristol, UK in June. And that class, believe it or not, and this is not even an influence joke, that class is filling up as of now. Like usually we start seeing people trickle in that like January, February, March, but man, that class has already got at least half the class full people signed up for that one already. So June, Bristol time, you're definitely going to want to get in there if you're looking for that. And then, of course, we hope to be back at Black Hat, but we can't announce that because we don't know. So if not, we will have one more APSE class for 2017.
Yeah, and we won't know about that one until first of the year probably, right, Chris?
Yeah, probably won't be till January, maybe mid-January when we're announcing next year's DEF CON and DerbyCon schedule and all that fun stuff at the same time when we'll have that.
That will be up on the website as soon as we have it.
It will. Oh, I have some other exciting news for people. I think they will like this news. Michelle and I just got done doing something really cool, and that is the recording of our audiobook, Fishing Dark Waters. There's a couple little post-production things that we're gonna get ready to fix, and then it should be out. So I don't have a date of release. Hopefully, we'll get that date of release really soon, but it's coming, and we should be able to see that really, really soon. So looking forward to that. Now, before we get our guest invited in, let me just do a little intro. We were on the web doing some reading, as we always do in different research papers, and we found this really interesting piece of research about profiling people based on the pronouns that they use and the words that they use. And the more we read it, the more we're like, we got to get this guy on the podcast. There's some really interesting stuff down there. So we reached out to Dr. James Pennebaker. I hope I'm saying that right. When we get him on, he'll probably correct me. And we're going to have a really great conversation today about profiling. So really nice to have you on today.
Good to be here.
We sadly, on the intro before, when we getting you on, you have already been abused by Dave, and Bruce Hornsby has already been forced upon you. We're very sorry for that.
I'm a convert now.
No, don't say that. Don't support him. It's just a bad idea.
Don't encourage him.
Top of his list to actively go and listen to. This is a great day for me.
You know, like when you go to a zoo and there's like, don't feed the animals, don't feed the Dave. Okay. Anyhow, let's get to more important things. First of all, if you could start off telling us a little bit about yourself and your research, and we can just start right there at the beginning.
I'm a social psychologist. I have an odd background. My early work dealt with how people cope with traumatic experience, and I discovered that if you had people write about upsetting experiences, it was associated with health improvements. And that ultimately led to my becoming interested in how they wrote and started looking at kind of the nature of language. And one thing led to another, and I developed a computer program to analyze text. And then as I got more and more deeply into text analysis, and this was in the early 90s, I became intrigued with how different people use language. And I started, it's hard to believe, but in the early 90s, the mid 90s, the internet was just coming on board. And at night, I would start downloading everything I could find, everything from AOL chat rooms to, almost anything. And started looking at how men and women differed, how young versus old people, how people who were crazy versus healthy. And I started to notice that the features of language that predicted differences were not what people were saying, not the content, but how they were talking. I ended up focusing a lot on a group of words that I didn't even know exist that were called function words, pronouns and prepositions, articles like a, n, and the, and auxiliary verbs, am, is, etc. And I started to discover that this group of words, these function words, were really powerful at predicting if someone was lying or telling the truth, if they were high status or low status, if they were men or women, if they were sociable or withdrawn, if they were smart or not smart. All of these dimensions that are so central to the way we judge people was right there in these types of words. So this computer program started to develop. The program that I developed was called Linguistic Inquiry and Word Count, LIWC, and we pronounce it Luke. And the Luke program started to catch on, and it's now used by companies all over the world. IBM uses it as part of their Watson program. I have a company called Receptivity that uses it for small business or any kind of size business. But trying to use the language to get a better sense of people. That's what got me where I am right now in terms of this interest in language and understanding people.
And what does Luke tell you about a person? Like with IBM, you said they're using it. What can you learn about a person by running this program against their chats?
Well, for example, if I analyzed a group of people, I would be able to tell you everybody has their own fingerprint. So I can use this as a form of author identification. I can do a reasonable job at predicting their age, their sex, their social class. I can do a reasonable job at telling you how they think. Are they formal, logical thinkers? Are they shoot from the hip kind of people? I can tell you if they're outgoing, if they're, all these different personality dimensions. I can tell you if they're depressed or depression prone. There are all sorts of things you can tell by the way people use words.
So is that something that you can teach people to do, or is this done just because through software?
You really have to have software because our brains aren't really attuned to picking up rates of word usage. So, for example, here I've talked for the last 5 minutes. If I ask you, did I use a high rate of articles, a, n, and the? You have absolutely no idea. I have no idea. And I can say, okay, start paying attention to the way I use articles. And you can do that for maybe a minute, and then your brain turns to mush.
Yeah.
The reality is you really have to have software to do it. So this is a sad commentary. I'm probably one of the world's experts on pronouns, and I can't tell if someone's using them at high rates or low.
That's actually okay. Like I've had the opportunity, as a totally different field, the opportunity to work with Dr. Ekman on reading facial expressions. One of my questions to him was, so you must be the world's greatest liar because of all the research you've done for the last 50 years plus. And he's like, actually, I'm a terrible liar. So just because you're in the field doesn't mean you can pull it off. What I found fascinating is on one of your websites that you have this tool where you can kind of run someone's Twitter profile and it analyzes and gives you this is what we think the kind of person you are. And I ran Michelle's Twitter profile through that tool and it ranked her as a Valley girl, which is hilarious. Michelle and I literally laughed for 20 minutes at that because she is the opposite of a Valley girl. It's totally not her at all. But what was fascinating was that that's how she kind of plays online, very playful and funny and using very jovial young language.
And I am neither playful nor funny.
You can be funny in a very dark, sadistic way, but on Twitter, one of the things that Michelle instituted, which is, I think this is how it ranked it. One of our classes we teach, she has a rubber chicken that she brings to the class, and every night we send students out on homework, And one group gets the rubber chicken, and they have to get a picture with a complete stranger with the rubber chicken. And she named it, what's the chicken's name?
Jurgen,
right? So Jurgen is the chicken. And a lot of her tweets are focused around Jurgen and his adventures, which is definitely not something that Michelle would normally talk about in normal life. But on Twitter, it definitely makes her appear as a different person than she is. So I found it fascinating that this tool you have looked at her online persona and ranked her and we're like, yes, this is exactly how we wanted it to come off. It was really accurate.
And I'm guessing, Michelle, on Twitter, you're one of these people who uses lots of exclamation points.
Yes, sir, absolutely.
No wonder I appropriately labeled you as a Valley girl.
Well, that's one of those things, right? Showing enthusiasm and friendliness, and punctuation and emoticons are kind of one way to do that in a virtual environment.
Exactly.
Yeah, Michelle's really good at being a chameleon, whereas with me, I'm pretty bad at it. So it ranked me exactly as I am. Overly direct, aggressive, and I'm like, okay, yeah, thanks, Twitter, thanks, doctor. You got me labeled already just from my tweets.
So I think a lot of people will really be interested in this tool, Dr. Pennebaker. Can you just give us kind of a brief glimpse into how and what it does, and how it might come up with a profile just based on these, very brief communications that we have?
That program is called analyzewords.com. Is just a dumb little program that some colleagues of mine and I put together honestly in about 2 hours. So it's not a deep scientifically valid thing, although it's based on good science behind it. And the idea was to it goes through and it pulls the last X number of tweets that you've made. And in it, there's certain features of language that we analyze, and it can give us a profile. So if you're an analytic thinker, if you're someone who is more analytic in their thinking, tends to use more nouns and articles and prepositions, and someone who's really low on that tends to be more informal and use more pronouns and present tense verbs. Each of those dimensions are made up both of analysis of words and also punctuation, also markers that is this a retweet, or are you making a call out to another person, which tells us if you are kind of socially engaged. So it's really interesting when you look at someone's tweet and you stand back and you analyze it a little bit, you start to realize that you can actually tell a lot about a person just by looking at a few of their tweets. You can get a sense of, do they orient toward people? Are they dark and cynical? Are they light and fun? It's really quite striking how much we reveal to others in everything we write.
From a security perspective for us, because of course, social media is a fascinating tool, but it's also one of the things that malicious attackers will use constantly. They'll look at what people are tweeting. The classic example that happened to be on the news was, someone putting a Facebook post up of their first trip to Paris and how excited they were. And they literally took pictures of their suitcases, pictures of their kids, pictures of them at their house, all on their iPhones, which had geolocation turned on. And then they left, next 3 weeks in Paris. And, a group of guys rented a moving van, came to their house and basically emptied their house from every possession they had because they knew that they were gone for 3 weeks. So when I hear about things like this, like the ability to profile people, we automatically say, okay, how can this be used to train people to protect themselves? Is there a way to use this as a training tool so that way people can, like Michelle, like someone would read her Twitter and totally get it wrong. And if they were going to try to write a fish that's going to get Michelle interested in opening some file, they're going to write her some email that looks like it belongs in a Valley Girl's email box, and she's going to be totally not interested in it because she's able to put on a different persona online. So is there some methodology to using these kind of tools as a training mechanism, do you think?
Yeah, I think there are. So, for example, you can write a program that looks at how closely your language, whether it's email, Twitter, or whatever, is with other people, so that I'm going to be more likely to connect to someone who talks like me. If they were just looking at Michelle's Twitter account, they would send something that would be inappropriate. And you could actually build a little device that could say, this is similar versus dissimilar. For most people, the matching program would work. In Michelle's case, it wouldn't. But those kind of things are easy to make.
You know what's also interesting about our job? It sounds so malicious, so excuse the explanation, but part of our job is to also try to uncover people's vulnerabilities so that way we can tell them where there's potential danger. Kind of like a doctor doing invasive tests to find if you have a disease and then they can fix it. It's similar to that, where we'll look at someone's online persona, try to figure out what kind of a person they are, then perform non-malicious attack vectors on them, and then say, well, here's why it worked, is because we were able to see that, you love this charity or that you love this restaurant. So when we sent you those fake coupon for that restaurant, that's why you opened it so fast. Part of what's interesting too in your tools is being able to use them as part of our services in order to help people learn what information they're putting out there and why it can be dangerous.
Which is interesting because what you're doing is essentially what I do and a few other people in the world do, which is kind of do the science of the personality that comes across both in the pictures they have as well as the words they use. So you're doing your own personality psychology the same way that we are. We're doing it a little bit more systematically, but it's the same problem. And then we run into a fascinating difficulty, and that is when people are posting on Facebook or elsewhere online or their emails, they are trying to reflect who they are. So by being too careful, all of a sudden Facebook or Instagram or whatever becomes a useless medium for us because we do want to convey who we are as opposed to hide ourselves to protect us from bad guys out there.
That's right. So that's an interesting thought. People who try too hard, it could almost be a revealing factor for an attacker.
That's exactly right. And that's the interesting issue is how do you, for example, you go and you catch somebody and show them that they're vulnerable because they are revealing the fact that they wear these kind of clothes, that they do this kind of things. They're clearly the kind of person who would like a vacation in this location. Well, Google knows that too, and they are doing personalized advertising for you. And now you're coming in saying, be careful, you're letting other people know that you're the kind of person who likes a vacation here. What should I do? Just try to put up a false sense of myself? Then all of a sudden I'm going to be getting Google ads that have nothing to do with my life.
It's an interesting conundrum. And one of the things, because we get that question from people, so should I just have a bunch of disinformation out there? And we always tell people, no, there are some who will promote that depending on the work you're in. But usually what we tell our customers is that you just have to be aware of what's out there. I always tell them this story, like when I wrote a couple books, and when I wrote my first one, I didn't want to use my daughter's name at all. Neither of my kids, their names were not listed. When I dedicated it, it was to my children, not even son and daughter. I really didn't want anyone to know anything about my family. And then in my second book, my daughter was in it. Her picture was in it. Her face was in it. And I had to realize that by doing that now that knowledge is public.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not private anymore. And because it's not private, if someone walks up to me and says, hey, how's Amaya doing? That does not mean that we're friends, because that information could be found on the internet in 1,000 locations or in a book.
And we even talk about it at a corporate level as well, because social media has become such an information medium for companies that get their message out there and get their brand out there. And so they're having to balance providing information and being transparent about business and advertising what they do with releasing information that could be used in an attack against the corporation. So it feeds up to all of those interesting balances that people and organizations have to set. So I think from your perspective, it's an interesting issue because you're looking at the sharing culture. And from our perspective in security, we're trying to tell folks, well, if you do that, you have to be aware that this is what occurs.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly right. It's an interesting problem. One of the issues I've been more focused on, and I've worked some with the various federal agencies, is how can you identify people who are a potential threat? In other words, are there certain ways that people change before they do something aggressive, whether it's behave badly online or start a war or go blow something up. But that's a very different kind of strategy in dealing with people who are not kind of professional hackers. What's interesting about that is very often before people will go and behave badly, they start to hide who they are. They stop using first person singular words like I, me, and my. They are trying to psychologically become more invisible. But I don't know if that's something in your world is of interest.
That is of interest. That's actually fascinating. We work a lot with law enforcement, of course, right? For a while, groups like ISIS would use Twitter. They use Twitter to recruit people. Twitter is a medium where they can promote their messaging and recruit people to their networks through that. So it would be interesting to analyze those kind of accounts to see if there's a shift in the way they use social media right before there's some kind of violent attack.
We've done this for Al Qaeda. We've done this, with the Boston bomber who used Twitter. We've done this for various presidents like George Bush before we go to war. And in all of those cases, you see this really pronounced change in pronoun usage in the weeks and months beforehand. Again, this kind of more psychological distancing. And it's really subtle. I mean, you wouldn't notice it unless you had a computer program and you see these really giant changes, but you can't hear it with your ears.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think in general, even moving away from sort of national and defense related, I think companies in general also are concerned with insider threat. And so if you have employees who are starting to demonstrate a certain kind of behavior, it would be interesting for a company to be able to look at that and perhaps predict someone who is going to be a threat internally to the company.
That's exactly right. And some of the work I do deals with that. Another thing that has been of interest, and I do some of this with a company that I'm part of, is looking at when someone is psychologically getting ready to leave a company. And it could be in a hostile way, or it could be just they have a better job offer. And one of the interesting issues is someone who's psychologically preparing to detach, they start to change in the way they use language in their email and any other kind of place that you can get analysis of language. They stop matching other people. They don't update their vocabulary with the way the rest of the people in their company do. So you can start to see these really subtle shifts of people as they psychologically detach themselves from the group.
What kinds of things will you see besides a not matching? That's fascinating to me as an employer.
Well, there's two ways to think about matching. One is if you look at any two people who are close, they tend to match each other in the rates that they use pronouns, prepositions, articles, and so forth. They use these at very similar rates. And you see this people who are in love, and you see it in people actually who are even in the midst of a big disagreement. They're on the same page, if you like. But if one person now is kind of, they've got their bags packed, but they're not telling the other person, they're not listening to that other person very well. And they're just not, the two of them aren't matching. There are also examples in terms of, let's say there's a new topic that the company is dealing with. So they're all now starting to talk with, we're now dealing with company X that makes, water coolers and blah, 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 blah. The person about to leave isn't staying up on the vocabulary of water coolers because, at the back of their mind, I'm out of here. I don't need to talk about this stuff. And so they kind of fake it. They don't use the language well.
So just out of curiosity, as you said, it's next to impossible for someone to be able to do this analysis in real time. How much of a sample do you need to do the sort of statistical analysis that's necessary to analyze? Are we talking huge chunks of conversation? Are we talking little snippets?
As with everything, the more is the better. But you can start to get an idea of things with relatively small text samples. So 300 words, 1,000 words would be better. 10,000 and 100,000 would be ideal. But even a small sample usually can give you a good idea.
That's really interesting because 300 words is basically 2 tweets.
No, those are characters. So for words, it would be more.
Oh, words, gotcha.
By the way, I say 300 words. It could be less. It depends on the context. I usually say 300 words just because I know I can trust it with 300 words, but I've done many, many analyses with 100 words or 50 words even.
And you're able to tell if like someone's gonna leave a company or divorce their mate or something based on the changes just within those 300 words.
That would be a gross overstatement. I can do better than a human can in predicting that. You have to understand, we live in a world of probabilities. So I can say there is a 30% chance that this person is going to leave. So that's my baseline.
Sure, you're looking at probability and confidence levels and statistics. Absolutely, that makes sense.
Now, another thing that we do that might be of interest to the security world is author identification. So, for example, you get an anonymous email, you get an anonymous something. Somebody writes an email or writes some kind of text that is intended to screw somebody else over. You use all of your identity information in terms of IP address, et cetera, and you can't figure out who it is. To what degree can you look at that, the way it's written, to learn who the person is? My lab's been playing with this quite a bit for the last few years. And it's interesting because you can do a pretty good job at identifying age, sex, education, social class, etc., and probably personality dimensions. And in some cases, really doing a pretty good job in terms of age and also sometimes from what part of the country the person might be, and also what their native language is if it's not English. And all of these are kind of some subtle things that you can pick up in terms of word usage.
I mean, are there little tricks of the trade that someone can learn to look for that doesn't involve a computer software, like something that a person can learn? Like, hey, when someone starts talking like this may mean X.
Well, there's certain things. So, for example, my interest is pronouns very often. So, a person who uses a high rate of pronouns, especially I, and low rate of articles A and V, the odds are pretty good chance that they're a female. They're probably younger, more likely than older. They are, if they use lots of words like he, she, they, we, you can also make a reasonable prediction that this person is very socially engaged. If they don't use those words, they're probably introverted. I say this, what's so interesting about this is looking at a text, you'd be surprised how lousy you are at telling if there are high rates of I words or she or they words. It's just our brain's just not able to do that.
Yeah, you have to. I would imagine with training, you can learn to look for certain things, but it's not going to be.
Well, the problem is, even I'm pretty lousy at this. And this is the thing that's been so striking for me. I'm reminded of this every few weeks. I'll look at a text and think, oh, yeah, this person's obviously such and such. And then I run it through the program and I realize, God, I just missed that one completely. Our brain just is so bad at estimating how frequently words are used.
Now, what about like for like someone like you who does this, but if you focus on it, so not doing it just by muscle memory, but if you said, hey, I'm going to try to analyze Michelle, so I'm going to go to her Twitter, I'm going to look at that, and I'm going to read her tweets, and are you better at it with that kind of a thought?
I'd be better than you, but I wouldn't be great. That's what's important to know. And the reason I say that is I had a real significant experience about 8 years ago. I was teaching a large class of about 500 students, and I was looking at dimensions of language that were either very formal versus informal language. And I pulled out of the top 500, I pulled out the top five of them and the bottom five. So these are really, really, really different essays. I then labeled one group X and the other group Y, handed them to my graduate students, and I didn't tell them how I had pulled them apart. And I told the students to give me what was personality differences between the X and the Y groups. And then I'd forgotten which was X and which was Y. And how hard could that be? Because one of the big differences is I usage. So I pulled out an X1 and a Y1, and I look at them, and I can't tell. I look at a couple of others. I can't tell because they both have I's. The difference is in one, they might have 7% of the words are I, and the other one, it might be 4% of the words are I. By the way, that's a huge, huge difference. but you just can't see it. I had to go through and count the words up by hand to figure out which group went with which. And that was a powerful reminder of, even though statistically the groups are wildly different, the human brain can't pick those differences up very well.
You know, we did a podcast with Dr. Sadia Afros. Do you remember that one?
Yep.
And she was taking writing samples as well, and I think her main takeaway was that the analysis that's necessary is something that's really difficult to do, but easy to fake. And I think that was her comment, was that they had done studies in which they asked people to write like a certain well-known author. And I remember saying that must have been really difficult for people to impersonate, and she said that it was actually relatively easy. It kind of strikes me as interesting because of the analysis, same sort of thing, the analysis that's necessary and how difficult it is, even though we're social and we're used to interacting socially and verbally and even more so online at this point, and we're still really poor at detecting all kinds of things to include deception. So it's, just the processing power that's necessary is something that we don't really possess at this point in time.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah.
That's why I think this is fascinating, because there is none. But it'd be great to have like a class that says, oh, here we can teach you how to analyze these tweets to determine what kind of person you're dealing with. But I guess there's a good part in that the fact that it's not too easy means that the bad guys don't have some, super big education that they're able to look at our Twitter accounts and determine everything about us psychologically, right? So that's a positive. I think from a protection standpoint, that it's not something that is just so easy to do.
Right.
Now that you've been doing this research for a while, have any of your writing or online habits changed as a result? Because now, I would imagine that you're pretty aware now relative to all of the rest of us.
Well, a little bit, not a lot. It's interesting. I've been a department chair for a long time, and now I'm kind of a senior administrator at my university. And one of my jobs has always been is to try to convince people to do what I want without telling them, but just encouraging them. And the art of persuasion and encouragement is one that's somewhat subtle. And I've noticed, for example, the use of I and we are interesting words. Politicians, for example, often use we quite a bit, trying to appear to be more friendly, more communal. And all the research I've done has shown that people who use the word we a lot are not very trustworthy, especially politicians. That actually they almost are hiding behind the word we. And you as a listener, you don't know who the we really is. And so the people who use we effectively make it absolutely clear who the we is that they are referring to. So, there'll be times in emails or even in the discussion, and I'm trying to get the group I'm talking with to get on board with what I want. And what I'll do is I won't just say, we should do so and so. I will make it very clear. Each of you, and this includes me as well, all of us, we want to do so and so. And, it's a very subtle way of using language that would never have occurred to me had I not been doing this work on language. And kind of the power of being personal. I think one of the interesting markers of status is a high status person often does not use the word I much. They use partly a high status person is looking out at the world and they're not looking at themselves. Very often I'll give talks on this and people afterwards will say, wow, I'm never going to use I when I make reference to other people, when I'm talking to other people. And what they're kind of saying is, I want to come across as high status. But what they're missing is use of I is a marker of being personal and being human, and that it's actually all right to use the word I because it is showing a certain kind of vulnerability and honesty.
I was just thinking then that we needed to be really kind of clear because we're talking about correlations and things that are indicators as opposed to causation, right? So because I am female, it doesn't mean that I will, that in and of itself is a predictor of how I'm going to speak. But because I am a female, then perhaps these kinds of things can be clustered underneath that.
That's exactly right. It also, the fact is that younger people use language differently than older people. And I think part of it is younger people are more insecure and older people are much more secure. And insecurity often goes with I word usage. It's not that being young makes you use I more, but being in situations where a person feels insecure, they naturally are more self-focused.
Sure, that makes perfect sense. And I think it's really interesting. I was thinking about your comments on the politicians and the use of we, and I was thinking, wow, I wonder if it's just that in general we tend to find many politicians untrustworthy, and for some reason that is correlated with this usage of we. Or I was just kind of trying to look at correlation and causation, and I think it's sometimes I imagine it's pretty hard to tease all of that out.
Yes, of course, it is.
What I found fascinating about your last point was when you said it, I was thinking about, recently you hear the debates, of course, so it's easy to pick out that when you talked about how politicians may use the we so bad. And if it's insincere or if you're not really sure who the we is, it kind of ruins the trust that we would have built.
That's exactly right. Yes.
The usage of we could have built that trust, and now it kind of ruins it and does the opposite of the usage of we because you used it in the wrong way and didn't define who it is.
Mm-hmm. I think that's exactly right.
That's fascinating. And is there a way to train that so you don't misuse it?
Yeah, I think so. Much in the same way I've just talked about it. I hereby entrust all of you when you go out in the world. If you're trying to talk to other people and make it clear that you're part of that group, then you would start off by talking about you and I, and then converting that to we, as opposed to using we. I will sometimes talk to my graduate students. They'll be coming in and I'll say, okay, we need to analyze this data. Well, that doesn't mean that they and I need to analyze this data. That really means you guys better analyze the data. Now, we're all friends here, but the fact is, I see this all the time. There's nothing that drives me more nuts when I'm at a restaurant and the waiter comes up and says, well, what do we want for dinner tonight? And I'm thinking, buddy, I didn't invite you to dinner.
It would be a funny response when they say that and be like, I don't know, sit down and tell me what we would like.
Exactly.
That's actually a funny point. That's a good example of a bad usage of we.
It really is.
Because you're not really building that camaraderie by using we. It's almost a disjoint.
That's right.
That's actually fascinating because I bet I'm guilty of that at times, misusing the we. And in my head, it probably sounds great, but to everyone else, maybe it's like a lack of trust there because of misusing it.
Is this why I don't trust you, Chris?
Oh, Dave, you're here now? Dave, you're here?
I've been here for listening for quite a long time, but you keep ranting on. I can't even get a word in here, Chris.
Oh, man. See what I had to deal with, Doc? See what I got to deal with?
See, I think that this is sort of the issue with bosses, right? Chris is a boss, Dave is a boss, and it is the whole, we need to do this, we as in you.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of an interesting thing that all of
What are you
us who have
saying, Michelle? What are you saying?
I am saying that I have heard that come out of your mouth on more than one occasion.
Michelle, I agree with you, and I think we can say that we all agree with you.
We as in you, yes.
That is actually a good point. I will do that often when we're having group chats with the company and say, okay, what are we going to do about this issue, right? So we have this issue. How are we going to fix it? And I really do mean it. Like, honestly, I really do mean it. But everyone, I think they're knowing it's not a we that's going to fix it. It's like, you need to fix this because it's your problem kind of thing.
One shouldn't spend too much time obsessing about this. Think how many words we're spitting out every second when we're talking with a group. Throwing out a few inappropriate we's is not going to ruin your day. But it is something to reflect on in terms of, when you are saying we, do you really mean you? And also, do all those people out there that you're saying we to, are they all sitting there thinking, am I part of this guy's we? And that's when things start to get ugly.
So is it best in the scenario that Michelle gave, where we're saying, what are we going to do to fix this? And I really mean Michelle. Is it best to just then own that and just say, okay, here's the problem we have, and Michelle, what are you going to do to fix that?
See, you did it.
I did it.
Well, in an interesting way, ask Michelle. My guess is if it's specific to Michelle, and if this is something that Michelle has to fix, I think asking her, what do you think should be done, probably is a more direct way to communicate.
Well, and it's interesting to me because, time and again, with all the guests that we have on the podcast and all the different topics that we talk about in relation to human interaction and security, a lot of it does come down to rapport and the relationships that you build with people and personalization and being able to recognize that or getting better at recognizing that and that being an effective way to influence and or test security, I guess.
And what's interesting about what you're saying, Michelle, is in all the studies that I've been involved with, the longer people are together, the more they increase in their use of we. And I think that's because there really is this sense of shared identity, shared groupness.
See, Michelle, that's why I do it.
I'll do the same thing too. Like, I like to make everybody feel that we're part of a team and we are all in it together. So I will do the same thing that Chris does, especially on a call. I'll include like, we are, going to do this, or, we as a company are moving towards this, when it really is, me that's making the change in doing that. So I try to be inclusive, probably to a fault.
Interesting. See what you did, Michelle? You brought this up. Now we're going to be overthinking it all the time. I'm just going to be like, I do all these things, and Michelle, go do this and fix everything that I did.
I know. Now I don't even want to say we anymore.
But now because you're going to be using I a lot, we're going to think you're a young, insecure female. So.
Or Donald Trump.
Listen,
we have bigly problems here. Bigly, okay? Bigly.
Let's chat about Donald Trump. So, not political wise, but does he come off sincere and genuine to some people?
He does, and actually, that's what makes him so interesting. He uses I at rates higher than anyone who's run this season, and I think that's his appeal. Is he comes across as authentic. Now, he might say one thing today and the opposite tomorrow, but I think he really believes both things that he says. So, I think that's one of his appeals. But there are other aspects of his language that suggest other features that one might not be looking for in a president.
I love how you paused for a second and carefully chose your words.
Well, he's smart. He knows this is not a political podcast, so he's very smart with his words. But
we would have just said it all out loud without even.
Now, with your background in social psychology, maybe you can help me with this problem. Let's make believe we have a guy. For hypothetical purposes, we'll call him Dave, and he forces certain types of music on people, even though they totally dislike it, to the point of where he gets a community of people to actually troll one person, no matter what conference or speech he's giving, and he goes to in random places, even paying students and classes, trolling him with music. How would you profile that individual?
This is all hypothetical, by the way, Doc.
Hypothetical.
I need to see the language of his trolling for me to do an analysis.
Oh, I'm going to send him some language of trolling. I'm telling you right now.
It's all because of love.
It's because we love, right? We Dave, right? Dr. Pennebaker, I know people are going to want to know more. They're going to want to read your research and maybe even use some of these tools that you have out publicly. Where can people find out more about you and your work?
For starters, just Google me, James Pennebaker, and I'm at the University of Texas, and you can get web pages from there. Also, I'm part of a company called Receptivity, and Receptivity, it ends in an I, receptivity.com. It's a Canadian-based company that actually has an API and other systems that allows you to go through and analyze any given text along multiple dimensions of personality. One other place is called secretlifeofpronouns.com. I published a book about 3 years ago called The Secret Life of Pronouns. And in it, it's kind of an in-depth analysis of all these different dimensions of language and how they're related to personality, how you can get a better sense of people's motives, how you can tell if people are in love or not in love, if they are lying or telling the truth, all of these different dimensions. And Secret Life of Pronouns, the book, of course, is fabulous, but that webpage also has a lot of different tasks, exercises you can do, put in text, and it'll analyze personality, how It gives you statistical feedback about how similar any two texts are. So there are a lot of ways that you can just get into this and just start playing with numbers.
Excellent. Yeah, I'm putting that in the show notes. One of the things we usually ask too is if there's any books that you've read that you would recommend to our readers. They don't have to be on tech or anything. There's anything that you feel was, man, this really helped me.
I'll tell you a novel that I read about 3 or 4 years ago that still keeps haunting me, and it's called Station 11. And it's a little science fiction-y, but just such a smart book.
Excellent. I'm going to write that down and get the author, and then we'll put a link to the Amazon on it there. I see Emily St. John Mandel. Wonderful. It's always good to have a book not even related to our field. We have a lot of, like I said, really avid readers, and they just love to read things, and especially if they're recommended by a guest that they really enjoyed, then they may feel that book's going to be good for them too.
And Doc, I have something for you too. If you're going to get into Bruce Hornsby, Mandolin Rain and The Way It Is are probably my 2 favorite songs from him.
I will get right on
that. Man, I tell you, Dave. Oh, I'm sorry, Doc.
Is Bruce Hornsby related to Nick Hornsby?
I don't think so. I don't. That doesn't sound familiar to me, and I know a lot about Bruce Hornsby. So
okay, and I know that Nick's written some really good books. So there we go.
I doubt they're related. Then I doubt they are. You know, the best part of a Bruce Hornsby song was replayed in a Tupac song. So that's about it. Oh boy, this has been really fascinating. I can't thank you enough for coming on the show and making time today, and the fascinating chat and your recommendations on your websites and your books. And we thank you again for what a fascinating talk today. Oh, what a great guest. I feel bad for him though. He was subjected to full Dave-isms today. Why would you?
I wonder if The Way It Is and Mandolin Rain go together at the same time. Hang on.
No, that's so awful. It's just
it actually goes together.
I'm positive we told him he only had like 2 plays in a podcast or something.
I wonder if I can mute Dave. Let me just see. Oh, look, I can mute people. As the owner, Dave is now muted. This is awesome. Dave, you're muted. I muted you. This is the best podcasting software ever in the history of mankind.
I imagine there will be some repercussions for that. I'm saying.
Dave says he refuses to use this in the future. You're unmuted, Dave. We love you.
This is not fair. If you can control my voice, my freedom of speech, Chris, that's not acceptable to me.
Oh, I actually am your freedom of speech monitor right now. I am the Bruce Hornsby destroyer. This is great. This is our new tool. Anytime Hornsby comes on, Michelle, they'll just be a mute.
In all seriousness, no, that was actually a really great guest, and I enjoyed him.
Yeah, I did too.
We need to treat this. We need to treat this like we treat our children. He gets like one or 2 warnings, and then it's a spanking. I mean,
listen, today's a celebratory day for me because Doc actually is going to check out Bruce Hornsby, and he made the comment while you paused. By the way, I hope you recorded that comment because that should be a sound blurb. That Dave obviously has a high aptitude for music.
I didn't hear that. Did you, Michelle?
I don't remember anything.
He's a music genius.
I didn't hear that.
He's a doctor.
I didn't hear that. I'm sorry that if you're making this up, Dave, I didn't hear anything like that.
Music genius. I'm changing my name from Hacking Dave to Music Genius.
Music genius. I didn't hear that. I'm sorry. I think the doc, he was a little confused I think when we said Bruce Hornsby, he was thinking of somebody else, like maybe, I don't know, Neil Fallon. I think maybe that's what he was thinking of.
In all seriousness, no. I mean, it actually is really cool on being able to understand like people's communication skills and when they may be sincere, when they're not sincere, and being able to like actually use computers to be able to predict that. It's fascinating to me that you can actually do from a fairly high level probability depending on your sample set. That's really cool.
Yeah, I had this thought while he was talking about the tools on his Secret Life of Pronouns website, like running our target's Twitter accounts or Facebook accounts through his tool and having it profile the target to tell us like what their likes are, what kind of person they are they not direct. That may help us to really work on our spearfishing a little bit more.
It'd be amazing if like seriously we ran his tool through your feed and it had like a severe dislike for Bruce Hornsby.
It was
amazing. I'd be like, we live in the future, man.
This is AI at its best. Well, hey, it labeled Michelle as a Valley girl, so
Well, even better is if like it was able to really understand you, Chris, like I do, and know that behind all of the hatred for Hornsby, you really do love it, and it actually predicted that. Like it's actually like has a fear of Hornsby, yet loves it deeply.
I still am getting slammed because of that stinking DerbyCon polygraph test.
Where you said you didn't like Hornsby and it showed that you did?
Yeah. The question is, do you like Bruce Hornsby? And I emphatically said no, and it registered every sensor as a lie.
I'm telling you, Chris, secretly deep down inside, you enjoy Bruce Hornsby.
The psychological term for it is reaction formation.
Thank you.
Everybody look that one up on Wikipedia.
I'm Googling it right now.
That's all it was reaction formation. I was so nervous about getting it wrong. I had butt clench. I had a heart rate raise. I sweated. That's all that happened. I was so worried. And then you know what happened? And this was the worst. Is I was totally focused. I had my eyes focused down, so I wasn't looking at any one person. And soon as I answered that question, I looked up, and there was 30 people with their cell phones, snapping the screen, videotaping it, and then tweeting it.
It was probably one of the most memorable moments I've had in my life.
Very sad. Michelle, anything closing before I...
I was going to say, this was a very good episode number 72 podcast.
It's 87.
I think everything that can be said has been said.
I agree with you. So if you would like to follow any of us, I am Human Hacker. Our corporate account is SOC Engineer Inc. Michelle is Sultry Asian. And Dave is Hacking Dave, soon to be Music Genius. No, I would just follow Hacking Dave.
Genius Dave.
Website, social-engineer.org or social-engineer.com. If you still use IRC, we are on irc.freenode.net.
Chris still has not opted me yet.
You are not in the channel. Come in the channel right now, and I will opt you.
I'm logging in right now, Chris.
Okay, do it. And I will give you ops right this second as we're on the podcast.
Hang on. I'm authenticating. Hang on.
Here, live on the podcast, Dave is getting opt.
All right, here we go. Wait, it's registering now.
There he is, Relic. Give ops. There you are.
Man. Kick.
Don't you kick me out of my channel, dang it. I'm serious. Oh, man. Why? He kicked me out of my channel. Dave. I cannot believe he kicked me out. Michelle.
You're incoherent with rage, Chris.
Why did I opt him? What is wrong with me? What is wrong with me? Have I not learned anything over the last decade? What is wrong with me?
I didn't ban you. You can just rejoin. You're good.
You are so horrible. I can't believe you kicked me out of my own channel. Yeah. Until next month, guys. See ya.
Stare into the embers on the frost of November and remember you were born a true son of Virginia. I was drowned to the ground as my world broke asunder. It was the morning of All Saints Day 98 when that old blind dog started calling me associate. Wouldn't have bothered me so much were it not for the facts. That was the truth of it. Recite our lineage, your genealogy. You've got to know your history, son of Virginia. Stare into the embers on the 1st of November and remember you were born